Tim's Odd Tale. This is the story of Tim. He was a klutz as a child, and his favorite superhero growing up was The Thing. Because all throughout his years in school, although he was the biggest, the strongest, the smartest, the most athletic guy in school, he wasn't the easiest to look at. Every time he would build the courage to say hello to a girl, she'd go, "Oh," upon looking at his face. And he would be left sitting with a blank, distant gaze as she walked away, wondering why. Only later to see that same girl with Eddie, the womanizing cool guy on campus. Girls were so happy to get Eddie's attention. They would often just not kiss Eddie, but they begged for Eddie, as well as cheered for Eddie, when the cheers were not even needed, because Eddie was athletic too. He was big too. He was smart too. Tim had grown tired of seeing Eddie get any girl he liked and having to just stare, baffled, wanting to break down inside so badly, but he couldn't because he too wanted to be cool. So he thought, and he thought, what was cooler than Eddie? An archer, a kung fu master, a ninja, a wizard, a Jedi? No. That wouldn't get him the ladies. They'd surely rather swim with sharks or turn themselves in for a crime they did not commit to be convicted by a judge immediately before any of those things made him appear cool to them. Tim thought, and he thought, and he thought some more, until he could think no more. With a headache, just as suddenly as he was about to give up, a light bulb went off. It lit big and bright. It was probably the greatest idea he ever had. He couldn't believe he hadn't thought of it before. It didn't really matter what made Eddie so cool now, because in school there was one rule to being cool. No matter what happened, no matter where it happened, you have to be brave. Because the coolest guys aren't afraid of anything. They're fearless. Halloween was approaching, and Tim intended to scare the cool right out of Eddie. The day of Halloween, Tim saw Eddie talking with some girl, as usual. Instead of his usual blank stare, Tim approached Eddie and invited him to the scariest haunted house in town. Being the cool guy he was, he could not refuse in front of a lady. Otherwise, the word would get around that he was unbrave. And he couldn't have that now, could he? They arranged to meet at midnight. Tim would arrive earlier, however, and instruct the owner to tell Eddie to go on without him, and he'd catch on up. When Eddie arrived, he did just that. But little did he know, Tim was waiting on the inside with a gun and a plan, waiting to scare the life right out of him. Eddie was making his way through the house and wasn't scared in the slightest. He seemed rather amused instead. That is, until Tim sprang out from the darkness and demanded the secrets to being cool or he'd shoot. Eddie, being totally clueless yet extremely popular, insisted he didn't know what Tim wanted him to say, that there weren't any secrets. Tim wouldn't believe him, and though he'd already rattled Eddie enough to make him soil his pants, it wasn't enough. He wanted answers, and if he could not get those answers from Eddie, the coolest guy in school, then what was the use of the coolest guy now? Tim snapped. He pulled the trigger. He unloaded the clip. The cops were called. Tim was tried, convicted, and didn't shed a tear. He just wanted to be cool, and that wasn't a crime. But now he paid the time. He'd also write his fans, because now he was part of some teenage society that wasn't afraid to kill a man, but he was cool. Tim.
Locked up, they won't let me out. And I had a long day in court, stress me out. Won't give me a bail.